Mama, ooh, paddle down the river. Get your butt to St. Charles in the boat. Carry on, carry on.
We have nothing to fear but barges themselves. Welcome back to 340 Paddler, and today we're going to talk about barges. This issue that we are constantly dealing with on the 340, we are told about the terror of them. Some of you won't run into any, and some years we might see 5 or 6. So let's talk about them. First of all, we're all afraid of what's going to happen. Now, in all of the years of the 340, there's only been one incident that I'm aware of someone actually running into a barge. And it happened up near the Osage River. The couple was confused about where the barge was going. They ended up going under the middle of it. So they came up the sides, which was very lucky for them. Their boat went through the propeller. It turned up like this. In fact, this is the boat, or very colorful spiral cut ham. You don't really want to end up like this. So let's make sure that you don't. There are two kinds of barges we're going to deal with. Barges going upriver and barges coming downriver. If a barge is going upriver, this is actually easier for you. Now, we'll deal with what to do in a second, but if it's coming upriver, you're generally going to see it for some distance. Even the most narrow area of the river or the tightest turn, you're going to see the barge for at least a few minutes. You're going to have the opportunity to make a decision as to what you're going to do. The biggest problem with barges going upriver isn't that you're going to miss them, it's the waves and wake that they're going to create as they go by, because they're fighting upriver, which means they're kicking a fairly sizable wake. Barges going downriver, whole nother ballgame. In 2016, I was probably an hour out of Jeff City. I had pulled over for a barge that was going upriver because I just didn't want to go through the washing machine at that point. I was being kind of lazy. And I got back on the water, and maybe 10 minutes later, suddenly there's this deafening horn behind me. I turn around to discover that there's a barge probably 100 feet behind me, and I moved faster than I have ever sprinted in my life to get out of its way. The problem with barges going downriver is you don't see them and you don't hear them. They're barely moving above current speed, so they are a bit of trouble. A lot of paddlers will put mirrors or other things on their boat just to be able to see these. Alternatively, kind of keep an eye out. Look back every once in a while so that you can see if there's anything coming. So let's talk about what to do if you come across one of these barges. And I think this illustration, while the slide isn't great or the photo isn't great, it does show what you're generally dealing with. So here's our barge. You do not want to be over here. Do not try and be on the channel side between the barge and the shore, especially on a curve, because you will get washed with about 5 feet of water and you'll get cracked up and crashed up on the riprap. You don't want to be there. So you have a couple of alternatives. First of all, you can go all the way to the opposite side and be off the channel. Look at all this space that you can occupy that he cannot. So you can be over here. Alternatively, assuming this wing dike is there before he gets there, you can hide behind a wing dike. Oftentimes in low water years, there's also sandbars over there. Just sort of get off the water. Wait for about 10 minutes. The water will calm down. You can head back out. You do not want to be too close to the barge. This water can be a little bit unpredictable, and as you can see, there's a huge wake here being thrown by his bow, but then the river's being chopped up by the props behind him. So you want to stay out of those areas. Get out of the way, be aware of the fact that he's going to chop up the river. Which brings us to the issue of barge wake. And it's hard to find a picture of barge wakes because usually if you're on the water in a barge wake, you're not exactly in a position to take pictures. So again, we're going to see two things coming off of a barge: the bow wake as well as the prop wash, which is also a product you can buy. And these combined aren't too bad as long as you kind of continue on, but you want to stay away from shore. So do not paddle along the shoreline on either side of the river. When you're taking these waves, you want to make sure you are head on to the wave. If you take them broadside, you're going to capsize, or it's far more likely that you're going to capsize. So take them head on, go right into the wave. Honestly, the better you can maintain speed, especially in the larger waves, the better you're going to be. Yes, you might get wet. Yes, it's going to be unpleasant, but do not get near the shore, because what you're going to do in that case, if you're too close to shores, you're going to get reflective waves coming in from the shore that have bounced off of whatever's there, and they're coming at you broadside while the rest of the waves are coming straight on. It's a mess. So you want to stay away from shore if at all possible. Just trust me, it'll be a smoother ride if you stay in those lanes 2 and 4, if you imagine the Missouri as a 5-lane highway. At night, barges are a whole nother issue. This is what you would often see at night when you're looking at a barge. It's going to be well lit. You're going to know it's coming, at least from upriver, if it's coming upriver. From behind you, it might be a little trickier, but we don't see it that often, and usually your ground crew and safety boats will let you know if something like that might happen. My recommendation in general is get off the water if you see a barge at night, because you can't see the waves coming at you. That being said, I do a whole video on night barges and how they signal and what they've done in the past. So make sure you watch that. Now, there's another kind of barge that we don't talk about as often, but you're going to see them potentially more often: sand dredges. And usually you see at least 3 on the race: one near Kansas City, one near Jefferson City, and one near the end. And this is your typical sand barge or sand dredge. So here's the actual dredging machine, this big white behemoth here. It's going to have anchor lines and everything else running off of it. You want to stay well clear. It is sucking sand off the bottom of the river, and it is depositing that onto the barge or tray sitting next to it. There will be 2 of these trays, one on either side. When one is full, they run it to shore, and then they fill the next one. Now, the concrete industry loves Missouri River sand, and the construction industry loves Missouri River sand. We don't love sand barges or sand dredges as much. When you come across them, especially at night, you may well see anchor lines, either from the tray in some cases, or more frequently from the dredge itself. They would be over here, for example. And they can stretch for a good 20-25 feet from the boat into the water. There's fairly thin steel cables, often 1 inch or less, which means especially at night you don't see them coming. So make sure that you are staying well clear. And the other thing to keep in mind, other than our anchor lines, is the tow itself. The tow is going to come over and pick up the full tray and move it to shore. Now, that could be 4 miles away. And unless you've passed it and you already know where it's going, you might not know where that tow is going. It could go forward and upriver, which would be fantastic. That's nice and predictable. But it can also just pull a Yui in the middle of the river to go back, for example, right behind where it started and drop that tray. In which case, it's going to chop up the river really badly and in a very unpredictable fashion. I find the wake coming off of sand dredges as more irritating than the wake coming off of barges, because from sand dredges, it's coming from all directions, and from barges, it's usually coming from the front. The other problem that you run into is these sand dredges, the boats running back and forth from them, are working very quickly. For them, time is of the absolute essence. They need to get that tray over to shore, pick up an empty tray, and get back to the dredge before the tray that's being filled is filled. Otherwise, they run into some problems. So give them a wide berth, and do not assume that you can predict exactly where they're going or exactly what they're doing unless you've been on the Missouri River for years and you know their patterns. You'll also run into barge terminals. One of the largest ones will be at roughly the Grand River, about 6 miles downriver from Miami. A lot of people will hit that at night or in the evening. What you want to be careful of at the terminals, and there's one at Jeff City immediately after the ramp on the other side of the bridge. We see them elsewhere as well. The problem you have is, first of all, anchor lines. So there's going to be anchor lines running off into the river. Be careful of those. Give it a wide berth. Secondly, you have a big floating solid steel structure. Now, steel doesn't react real well to water, as in the steel doesn't move and the water does. So if you end up here in front of this barge, you will get swept under it, because all of that force of the water is pushing against an immovable object. As soon as you become the movable object, you will take the brunt of that force. You don't want to end up in that situation. And while this looks like a great sheltered area hiding between the barge and the shore, oftentimes this water is moving just as quickly. You can see we're on the channel side here. And so it's going to be pulling you into here where you have no escape. The only way to get out is to go upriver. And that's never a good situation on the Missouri. So stay well clear of the barge terminals. Give them a wide berth. Make sure you're a good 100 feet into the river away from them. These barges are necessary to commerce, or at least to the asphalt and potentially sand industry. We're going to see them on the Missouri River. We see them upriver, we see them downriver. Some of the operators will stop running during the 340, but some do not. So it's something that we shouldn't be scared of, but something that we should be prepared for. This is 340 Paddler, hoping that you keep your paddle in the water.